In the heart of Eldoret, a village steeped in tradition and governed by a strict moral code, Mary, Amina, and Zawadi found themselves at the center of a scandal that would change their lives forever. The three women had committed what the village elders deemed an unforgivable sin, selling their breast milk for money. This act, seen as a desecration of the sacred duty of motherhood, was considered a severe affront to the gods. The punishment was harsh and immediate: exile. With heavy hearts and tearful goodbyes, the women gathered their few belongings and, along with their 3 young children, left the only home they had ever known. Their journey was long and arduous, filled with uncertainty and fear of the unknown. Yet, amidst their sorrow, they clung to the hope that they could start anew. After days of travel, they arrived at Nakuru, a village nestled between fertile hills and flowing rivers. The village was a stark contrast to the rigid and judgmental environment of Eldoret. Here, the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and the sounds of laughter echoed from every corner. It was a place where they hoped to rebuild their lives, free from the stigma of their past. The women quickly integrated into the community, their resilience and hard work earning them the respect of the villagers. They befriended their neighbors, shared meals, and even received a plot of land where their cattle could graze and where they could grow vegetables for their home consumption. Life in Nakuru was different. It was peaceful, filled with the promise of a fresh start. However, the shadow of their past was not so easily shaken. The former chief of Eldoret, still harboring resentment, made a journey to Nakuru. He sought out the village chief, Mr. Odunga, and warned him of the women's past transgressions. He urged the chief to keep a close eye on their activities, fearing that the sins of Eldoret might follow them to Nakuru. Despite this, the women thrived. The lack of stress and the warmth of the community did wonders for their spirits and their health. Zawadi and Amina, in particular, began to blossom once more. Their youthful beauty returned, and they radiated a vibrancy that had long been suppressed in Eldoret. At the village market, they attracted admiring glances, and soon, marriage proposals began to pour in from the local men. But as they considered the possibility of new beginnings, fate intervened in a way that none of them could have predicted. One crisp morning, the peace of their new life was shattered when Kofi, Amina and Zawadi's younger brother, suddenly fell gravely ill. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and the women, frantic with worry, took him to the village's most esteemed medical specialist. The specialist examined Kofi with great care, but what he discovered sent chills down his spine. Kofi was not suffering from an ordinary illness. He was possessed by a malevolent spirit known as Nyejo. Nyejo was a deadly clan spirit, feared across many villages for its ruthlessness. It was said to be a vengeful entity, summoned by the wrath of the gods when deeply offended. The specialist explained that the spirit's presence was a direct consequence of the women's actions in Eldoret. By selling their breast milk, they had angered the gods, who had now sent Nyejo to punish them. The specialist's words filled Mary, Amina, and Zawadi with dread. The only way to save Kofi, and to prevent the Nyejo spirit from spreading its curse to other children in Nakuru, was to perform a sacrificial ritual at the village shrine. The offering required was something precious, something that would show their deep remorse and willingness to atone for their sins. They were told that the sacrifice must be their one and only cattle, the lifeblood of their livelihood in Nakuru. The news spread through the village like wildfire. The once friendly villagers now looked upon Mary, Amina, and Zawadi with a mix of fear and concern. They knew that if the ritual was not performed soon, the entire village could suffer. The Nyejo spirit was not to be taken lightly. It was known to cause illness, death, and devastation wherever it went. As the night before the ritual approached, the atmosphere in the village grew tense. Mr. Odunga, the village chief, visited the women's home before dawn. He offered words of comfort and support, reminding them that the village was united behind them, despite the fear that gripped everyone. The villagers, too, rallied around the women, showing up at their doorstep to offer help in any way they could. Before the ritual could begin, the women received a harrowing message. Almost a quarter of the village's youngest children had already shown signs of possession by the Nyejo spirit. The situation had become more critical than anyone had anticipated. Time was of the essence. At the break of dawn, a solemn procession formed in the village square. Leading the way were Mary, Amina, and Zawadi, followed closely by the village chief, the specialist, and the villagers who had come to lend their support. The journey to the mountain shrine was long and arduous, taking nearly an hour to complete. The path was steep and treacherous, but they pressed on, driven by the urgency of the task at hand. When they finally arrived at the shrine, the air was thick with tension. The shrine itself was an ancient structure, built of stone and covered in moss, standing as a testament to the village's long history of appeasing the gods. Mary's cattle, the sacrificial lamb, was brought forward. The women wept as they led the animal to the altar, knowing that this was the price they had to pay for their transgressions. The ritual began with the specialist chanting ancient prayers, invoking the gods' mercy. The cattle was sacrificed, and its blood was carefully smeared on the walls of the shrine. The villagers joined in the prayers, their voices rising in unison as they pleaded for the gods to spare their children and free the village from Nyejo's curse. The hours passed slowly, each minute filled with desperation and hope. As the final prayers were uttered, the sky, which had been overcast and foreboding, suddenly broke open. A torrential downpour began, drenching the villagers to the bone. But the rain was not a sign of despair. It was a symbol of the gods' acceptance of their sacrifice. The rain washed away the fear and uncertainty, leaving behind a sense of renewal and relief. In that moment, the possessed children, including Kofi, were released from the clutches of the Nyejo spirit. The villagers erupted in cheers, their unity and faith having saved them from a terrible fate. Mary, Amina, and Zawadi were overwhelmed with gratitude and relief, knowing that their sacrifice had not been in vain. In the days that followed, the village of Nakuru was transformed. The villagers, deeply moved by the women's willingness to sacrifice their only cattle for the good of the community, decided to repay them in kind. In a grand gesture of unity and gratitude, the villagers presented Mary, Amina, and Zawadi with 10 cattle, 10 times what they had given up. The gesture was not just about replacing what was lost. It was a symbol of the bond that had been forged through hardship and sacrifice. Nakuru became known far and wide as a village where unity and compassion prevailed. Neighboring communities, hearing of the ordeal and the strength the villagers had shown, began to emulate their ways, fostering stronger bonds among themselves. The story of Mary, Amina, and Zawadi became a legend, a tale of redemption, sacrifice, and the power of community. The women, once outcasts, were now pillars of their new community. They continued to live in Nakuru, raising their children and contributing to the village's prosperity. The memory of the Nyejo spirit and the ritual at the mountain shrine remained with them, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of living in harmony with both the gods and each other. And so, the village of Nakuru thrived, a place where people were always there for one another in times of need. The bonds forged in the face of adversity held strong, and the people of Nakuru lived happily ever after, united as one big family. Kindly like, share, comment, and subscribe so as to get notified once we upload new content.